Black girls like you should stick to cleaning, not spinning fairy tales about Navy SEAL moms. With one cruel stroke of her red pen, Mrs. Harlan branded Nia Vance a liar in front of the entire class, and Oak Creek High became a nightmare. Because as Nia stood up for her mother's honor, the bullying escalated. She was humiliated, shoved, cast out, and left to suffer under the watchful eyes of a teacher who thrived on cruelty. But everything changed the moment thunder shook the school grounds. A military helicopter descended, and Nia's mother, Commander Yara Williams, stepped out in full dress uniform. In that instant, every bully in Oak Creek wished they'd never crossed her path. Are you watching this on your phone, tablet, or TV? Stay with us and hit subscribe. You won't believe the secrets that unravel behind Oak Creek's flawless reputation. No one at Oak Creek ever expected a black girl to dream too big, especially not in Mrs. Harlan's advanced American history. The air in that classroom crackled with silent rules. Speak softly, never contradict, and above all, don't dare step outside the place this town assigned you at birth. Nia Vance, with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, carried a different kind of defiance. She knew every smirk that flickered on her classmates' lips when her hand shot up. Every loaded pause before Mrs. Harlan, always so impeccably pressed and grinning with the brittle polish of someone who never missed a Sunday service, would sigh and allow her to speak. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in harsh, slanted stripes as Mrs. Harlan announced the week's essay prompt, her voice syrupy with false warmth. Tell us about a hero in your family, someone real, someone whose life you know well. Her eyes swept the room, but settled predictably on Nia, as if daring her to try something foolish. The room was a theater of posturing. Brody Caldwell, Oak Creek's golden boy, varsity quarterback with a bone-white smile and legacy status, lounged with one foot up, spinning a football on his knee. When he caught Nia's gaze, his mouth curled in a slow, practiced sneer. To him, she was a glitch in the perfect image of Oak Creek, out of place, out of luck, out of bounds. The bell rang for presentations, and Nia's name was the first on Mrs. Harlan's list. She rose, hands trembling just enough to betray her excitement. She didn't look at anyone but her paper. "My mother," Nia began, her voice steadying with each word, "is the bravest person I know. She is a phantom on the ocean. She commands SEAL Team 6. She goes where the darkness is thickest so other families can sleep safe at night." A beat of silence, then laughter, loud and ugly, bounced off the whiteboard. Brody snorted. "Navy SEALs don't let in women, much less a black one. Your mom probably just mops the floors on base. Be real." The laughter doubled. Nia stood, heart pounding, staring straight at Mrs. Harlan, hoping for just one moment of adult protection. Mrs. Harlan's eyes glinted with something meaner than skepticism. "Nia," she said slowly, as if pronouncing a sentence, "I told you to write about the truth, not fairy tales. You may not have much, but honesty is free. You should learn to use it." A hush fell. Brody's smile grew sharper. The rest of the class craned their necks, watching Nia shrink. Mrs. Harlan pressed on, her voice rising for effect. "Some of us here are Blue Star mothers. My son serves proudly. He's not hiding behind stories or false glory. He earns respect. He doesn't invent it." The words Blue Star Mother lingered in the air like a trophy. Some students applauded. Nia tried to steady her breathing, tried not to show how those words sliced at the only pride she had left. Mrs. Harlan crossed the room, heels striking the floor like the verdicts of a judge, and snatched the essay from Nia's trembling hand. She flipped to the title page where Nia had written carefully in bold letters, "Hero." Without a pause, the teacher drew a vicious red slash through the word. The pen hovered, then carved new letters above it. Liar. She turned the essay so the class could see, brandishing it like evidence in a trial. "Let this be a lesson," she said coldly. "Lying gets you nowhere. No one wants to hear about fake heroes, not in this school, not in my classroom." Nia could feel the room closing in, the sound of Brody's snickering, the hush of those who were glad it wasn't their turn. She swallowed the burn in her throat and blinked hard, refusing to give Mrs. Harlan the victory of seeing her cry. "Return to your seat," the teacher snapped, "and tomorrow, bring something real, even if it's embarrassing, even if it hurts." Nia sat down, fists clenched so tight her nails left crescents in her palms. The word liar burned red on the paper, an accusation she couldn't erase. The bell rang again, signaling the end of class, but the real lesson hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "Here, your truth will always be marked for destruction." As the students filed out, Nia gathered her shattered courage and the ruined essay. Under her breath, she whispered a promise that only she could hear. "I will show you who my mother is. I will show you all." But she could not know. None of them could. The nightmare was only beginning. The cafeteria at Oak Creek was a kingdom ruled by noise and unspoken laws. Every table was a fiefdom. Athletes, honor students, drama kids, and those who drifted around the margins, always half expecting a chair to be yanked away. Nia usually slipped into the far corner, back pressed to the wall, her tray a shield. But today she clutched something different in her fist. A Navy SEAL challenge coin, dark bronze, heavy and cold. She had slipped it from her mother's keepsake box, the only physical proof she could offer a world that spat on her word. She waited until the room thinned out, then crossed the floor to Brody's table. Brody, surrounded by his pack, tore open a bag of chips and watched her approach with mock surprise. Nia drew a deep breath. "This." She held up the coin, the golden trident catching the overhead light. "Is my mother's. She earned it when she was deployed with SEAL Team 6. You called me a liar. I want you to see the truth." The laughter that followed was vicious. "Oh, so your mom shops on eBay now?" Brody's voice was loud enough to turn heads. He snatched the coin from her palm, rolling it between his fingers. "Where'd you steal this? Goodwill or some army surplus bin?" His boys crowded around, eyes gleaming with the thrill of a new humiliation. "Show us the receipt, Nia." "What? No Amazon box?" "I didn't steal it," she insisted, voice cracking. But Brody was already climbing onto his seat, raising the coin overhead like a prize fighter with a championship belt. "Attention, Oak Creek," Brody shouted. "We got ourselves a hero here, or maybe a thief, because only a thief pretends to be military." He turned, addressing his audience, hungry for the mob's approval. "You know what that's called, Nia? Stolen valor. People go to jail for that." Phones flashed out. TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. An endless parade of eyes capturing her shame, her pain, her desperate protest. A girl in a cheerleader uniform pointed her camera at Nia's face, laughing. "Tell us again about your secret agent, Mommy. Pose with your coin, liar." A wave of chanting rolled through the tables. "Liar! Liar! Liar!" Food was banged against trays, shoes stomped, every kid competing to outshout the next. Nia lunged for the coin, tears starting to sting her eyes, but Brody jerked it out of reach, sending her stumbling backward. He looked her up and down, voice dripping with disgust. "Next time, bring some real proof. Or just admit you wish you were one of us." A hand shoved her shoulder. She stumbled, her tray clattering to the floor. Spaghetti and milk splattering across her sweater and jeans. The humiliation was total. Greasy noodles sticking to her chest, the sting of chocolate milk in her hair. The laughter hit a new crescendo. She bent to scoop up her ruined lunch. But Brody stepped forward, holding the coin between two fingers as if it were something filthy. "Let me show you where lies belong," he said, voice low and clear. Every eye on him. He marched to the row of recycling bins at the end of the cafeteria, made a dramatic show of turning the coin over in his hand. Then, with a flick of his wrist, tossed it into the blue bin. Plastic and metal clanging as it disappeared from sight. "That's where your stories go, Nia. That's all they're worth." A final wave of derision swept the cafeteria. She heard her name turned into a punchline, twisted into a new nickname. Valor Girl. A hashtag instantly born, spreading faster than a bruise. She stared at the recycling bin as the crowd slowly dispersed, the other students sliding back into their private dramas. No one offered a hand. No one cared that her cheeks burned or her eyes overflowed. Not a single adult in sight. Nia moved in a daze, picking noodles from her sweater, refusing to cry, refusing to scream, refusing most of all to run. She walked to the bin, reached inside, her arms searching through the sticky soup of soda cans and half-eaten sandwiches. Her fingers closed on the cold, familiar edge of the challenge coin. As she pulled it free, a single drop of ketchup rolled down the side, as red and accusatory as Mrs. Harlan's pen the day before. She clenched the coin so tightly her knuckles blanched. The cafeteria was emptying now, Brody's laughter echoing against tile and glass. But behind the glass of the staff office, a pair of watchful eyes narrowed, seeing not just the spectacle but the truth everyone else refused to face. Nia left the cafeteria, coin burning in her palm, her story still untold, but not unnoticed. Rumors moved through Oak Creek faster than the morning bell. Nia felt them before she heard them. A quick hush in the hallway, a sideways glance from students who just last week had ignored her completely. She could taste it in the air. Fresh cruelty, sharper than before, and now it wore the face of the adults who were supposed to protect her. Mrs. Harlan sat in the teacher's lounge, her back perfectly straight, clutching her mug like it was a scepter. She pressed the speakerphone button on her desk, dialing the number listed for Nia's mother. Again, the call hit a wall of impersonal authority. "This voicemail is not accepting messages at this time." Her lips tightened. Around her, other teachers shuffled papers, whispering in the soft, dangerous way only teachers could, making judgments sound like facts, passing verdicts with a frown or a single, well-placed sigh. "Still nothing?" asked Mr. Dalton, the chemistry teacher, not bothering to lower his voice. "No," Mrs. Harlan answered, her tone heavy with implication. "It's always voicemail. One wonders, doesn't one?" She let the phone rest, eyes lingering on a faded photograph in her wallet. Her son, Kyle, in crisp uniform. A picture as out of date as her values. To the world, she was a blue star mother, but in secret, that star had burned out years ago. Kyle's dishonorable discharge was a wound she hid behind scorn for others, behind the armor of school policy and whispered poison. But no secret stayed secret for long at Oak Creek, and when Mrs. Harlan wanted to wound, she aimed for the kill. By noon, Nia's story had mutated. In the teacher's lounge and between classes, Mrs. Harlan made sure to drop a word here, a raised eyebrow there. "I just hope Nia's home life is all right," she mused to Miss Carter in the copy room. "We know so little. Some students, well, sometimes they make up stories to cover other things. I'd hate to think." Her voice drifted, inviting speculation. Miss Carter, who had seen enough pain to recognize it in a child's eyes, frowned but said nothing. It didn't matter. The story was out. Nia was trouble or alone, or worse. By afternoon, a handful of students traded their own versions of the tale. "Heard her mom's in jail," one whispered by the water fountain. "My brother said she's in foster care. That's why she's so weird. She's always staring at her phone, probably waiting for her next court date." Another chimed in. Nia felt the words before she heard them, saw the clusters of kids who parted when she walked by, the sudden stops in conversation, the way no teacher met her gaze for more than a second. All the while, Brody strutted through the halls like Oak Creek's untouchable prince. But after school, the mask slipped. Alone in the boys' locker room, Brody fumbled through his gym bag, hands shaking. He yanked out a prescription bottle, popped 2 tiny white pills, and swallowed them dry, his face contorting as the taste hit his tongue. A moment later, he slumped onto the bench, head in hands, shoulders heaving. The pills dulled the ache, but never erased it. Never shut up the voice of his father. The politician never soothed the hollowness left by a mother too drunk to care. Each new humiliation he heaped on Nia was another attempt to drown his own shame, to feel in control, even for a moment. He left the locker room just as the final bell rang, slipping back into the role of bully with practiced ease. For Nia, the cruelty followed her everywhere. In the bathroom, she overheard 2 juniors giggling about orphans and liars. In the cafeteria, someone knocked her tray from her hands, then apologized with an exaggerated wink, as if she should be grateful for the attention. That evening, exhausted and numb, Nia returned to her locker. As she twisted the combination, she noticed a fresh, toxic smell. Spray paint still sharp in the air. When the door swung open, her breath caught in her throat. Across the metal, in jagged red letters, "Go back to the hood." Her fingers trembled. She looked up and down the hall. No one met her eyes. The words burned into her memory deeper than any insult hurled in daylight. She wanted to scream, to tear down the locker, to scrub the paint away with her bare hands. Instead, she stood motionless, the hallway spinning around her. Rage, humiliation, and a desperate sense of isolation crashed through her. At that moment, something broke, not in defeat but in resolve. Enough. Nia wasn't going to hide anymore. She wouldn't let her mother's name be dragged through the mud. Wouldn't let these adults and children decide what was true. Her jaw set. Nia slammed the locker closed and stalked down the hall, ignoring the stairs, ignoring the whispers that chased her like ghosts. Tomorrow she would face Mrs. Harlan directly. She would demand justice, demand an apology, demand at last respect. But she had no idea the confrontation would spiral far beyond words, into violence that would leave scars no one could ignore. Oak Creek after hours was a different world, always stripped bare of noise, classrooms washed in shadow, the pretense of civility peeled away by silence. Nia stood outside, room 214, her mother's photograph pressed flat in her trembling palm. The image was grainy, almost faded from years tucked inside a wallet. Her mother, Yara Williams, proud and unyielding in navy dress blues, medals gleaming against dark skin, eyes narrowed with that same steely resolve Nia saw in her own reflection. Inside, Mrs. Harlan sat behind her desk, flipping through test papers as if nothing in the world could touch her. But when Nia knocked and stepped in, the older woman's posture stiffened, lips flattening to a bloodless line. "Class is over, Nia. If this is about your grade..." "It's not," Nia cut in, her voice unexpectedly clear. She walked up to the desk, holding out the photo. "I want you to look at this. I want you to see her. My mother, the woman you called a lie." Mrs. Harlan took the photo with the tips of her fingers, barely glancing at it. The silence between them was brittle, humming with something far uglier than simple disbelief. She's in uniform, Nia said, voice cracking. That's not some Halloween costume, that's Navy. You owe me an apology. Behind them, the classroom door inched open. Brody, hidden in the shadows, eyes glinting with anticipation. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched, hungry for fresh humiliation. Mrs. Harlan stared at the photo, knuckles whitening. For the briefest second, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Doubt worming its way through a fortress of prejudice and pride. Then something inside her snapped shut. Her voice, when it came, was sharper than broken glass. I don't owe you anything, Nia. I owe this school the truth, and I won't let you soil its reputation with your sick little fantasies. She slammed the photo down, the edge catching Nia's hand. Nia didn't flinch. You don't know anything about my family? She shot back. You don't care about the truth. You just want someone to blame. I'm not your scapegoat. Mrs. Harlan's hands shook. The mask of the Blue Star Mother was slipping. Beneath it, the raw wound of her own disgrace festered. Her son, her pride, her legacy, would never wear that uniform again. His shame, a stain she could never scrub away. Nia's voice, clear and relentless, felt like salt on every old wound. Do you know what it's like, Nia? Mrs. Harlan pressed on. To be told every day that you're nothing? To fight for scraps of respect in a place that hates what you are? My mother fought for this country. She fought for people like you. And you'd rather tear her down than admit you're wrong. Enough. Mrs. Harlan's voice cracked. Rage, grief, humiliation boiling over. She snatched the photograph, ripping it in half, then again and again. Shredded pieces fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. Nia froze. Then she dropped to her knees, hands desperately gathering the fragments, her breaths coming in ragged sobs. You, she choked, anger sharpening her grief. You're the one who's ashamed. You lost, and you want the world to bleed with you. I'm not afraid of you, Mrs. Harlan. You're just a coward, hiding behind your rules. The insult landed with surgical precision. The older woman's eyes bulged, face flushed a dangerous red. Every failure, every denied appeal for her disgraced son's honor, every sleepless night spent clutching a fading photo came roaring to the surface. Her voice was nothing but venom. You little liar, you filthy, arrogant little liar. People like you are the rot in this country's core, always playing victim, always crying for handouts, always pretending you're more than what you are. Nia recoiled but held her ground. You can say whatever you want. You can hate me. You can even hate my mother, but you can't erase what she's done. Mrs. Harlan's fury spiraled into something monstrous. She rounded the desk in 3 strides, high heels striking the tile like gunshots. Nia, still on her knees, barely saw the kick coming, a flash of black leather, the sharp agony exploding in her ribs as the toe of Mrs. Harlan's shoe drove into her side. Nia crumpled, body crashing against the base of the door, pain radiating through her chest. Mrs. Harlan towered above her, hair disheveled, face twisted into a mask of hatred. Get out. Get out of my classroom, and don't you ever speak of your imaginary mother again. You don't belong here. Go back to your kind. Back to your ghetto. This school isn't for you. Brody, breathless in the shadowed doorway, didn't laugh. For a brief moment, his eyes widened, the spectacle more than anything he'd bargained for. Nia lay curled on the floor, clutching her side, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The humiliation, the pain, the taste of metal in her mouth. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her world shrank to the sound of her own heartbeat, pounding in her ears like war drums. Mrs. Harlan leaned in, spat one last insult. You'll never be more than a lie. But then, a sound. distant at first, then growing, blades slicing the air, a low, thunderous vibration rattling the classroom windows, the unmistakable roar of a military helicopter descending. The glass trembled, dust dancing on the sills. Nia's fingers closed around a single scrap of her mother's photo as she stared at the sky outside. Her voice, barely a whisper, but steady with promise. My mother isn't imaginary. She's home. The deafening thunder of helicopter blades sent a wave of panic rolling over Oak Creek's manicured football field. Students scattered from the bleachers, books tumbling, coaches barking orders no one obeyed. Even the cockiest seniors who thought nothing could shake the world they ruled shrank from the dark shape descending from the sky. The helicopter hit the ground with military precision, its doors flying open before the rotor stopped. From within, Commander Yara Williams stepped out, every detail of her uniform razor sharp. Gold insignia flashed across her chest, medals layered in a silent testimony to danger survived, honor earned, and battles no one in this privileged town could even imagine. 2 SEALs flanked her, stone-faced, scanning the crowd with the ice-cold discipline of men used to following only the toughest. Every step Yara took radiated command. Her boots barely left a mark on the field, but her presence flattened the usual hierarchy of the school in an instant. The principal, Mr. Vance, hustled across the grass, tie flapping, face frozen in a smile that was meant to charm, but only trembled. Mrs. Harlan trailed behind him, adjusting her hair, dabbing at her cheeks, desperately trying to manufacture composure. "Welcome," Mr. Vance called, too loud, voice cracking. "We weren't expecting. Is this for a special assembly?" Mrs. Harlan's smile was brittle as glass. She flashed her Blue Star mother pin and stepped forward, trying to guess which hand to shake, which story to tell. Her gaze flickered with greedy hope. A military inspection, maybe, or a chance to bask in reflected glory. But Yara didn't slow, didn't even glance at them. She walked straight through their greeting, the SEALs falling in beside her. The crowd parted. It was not deference. It was awe, fear, and the ancient instinct to move aside for power you cannot fight. On the sidelines, an ambulance waited, red lights off, but a small group had gathered. School nurse, a security guard, and Nia sitting on the bench, one arm pressed to her ribs, eyes red but unbroken. Her ruined sweater still bore the stains from lunch and the pain of Mrs. Harlan's kick. She looked impossibly small in the midst of all that chaos. Yara's face, set in hard lines, barely flickered as she took in her daughter's condition. But for a fraction of a second, something primal, rage, anguish, flared in her eyes. She knelt before Nia, the medals and the reputation and the world's expectations falling away, leaving only a mother with a broken child. Nia reached for her, voice shaky but certain. "Mom." Mrs. Harlan's mask cracked, her posture wilted, her face blanched as if the blood had drained from her body, leaving her exposed, trembling, and lost. For the first time, she truly looked at Nia and then at Yara and saw what power really meant. "Who did this to you?" Yara's words were not loud, but they left no air in the world for lies. Nia's eyes flickered, a silent message passing between them. Mrs. Harlan shuffled backward, nearly tripping over her own heels. The nurse tried to explain, but Yara cut her off with a glance. "Let my daughter speak." Nia hesitated, breath rattling in her chest. It was... She didn't need to finish. Yara stood, her full height commanding silence from every student, teacher, and parent still within earshot. Yara's hand went to her sunglasses. Slowly, she pulled them off, revealing eyes sharp as razors, eyes that had stared down death and cowardice in a dozen war zones. She locked her gaze onto Mrs. Harlan, whose composure was now gone, hands shaking, lips working silently. Yara's voice cut through the field, clear and merciless. "Are you the one who taught my daughter that black women can't serve this country? That no matter what we do, we'll always be liars to you?" No one moved. The principal's jaw hung open. Mrs. Harlan swayed as if the words had struck her physically. The entire field fell into a silence so total it seemed the air itself held its breath. Mrs. Harlan tried to answer, but only a whimper came out. The students closest to her drew back, as if the contagion of her cowardice might spread. Some even looked at Nia with new eyes, eyes that registered, maybe for the first time, the monstrous unfairness they had witnessed and helped to create. Yara knelt again, this time gathering Nia gently, her movements precise and steady, a living shield against the ugliness of the world. The commander's presence changed everything. The rules of Oak Creek had been rewritten. Mrs. Harlan's power was gone, crumbling into dust beneath the weight of the truth. Yet, as the crowd gawked, held captive by the force of what had just happened, no one noticed the trembling in Mrs. Harlan's hands, or the way she shrank into herself, a false idol, toppled by the very justice she had spent her life denying. A deathly silence settled over the field. The shock had only just begun. No one yet knew how deep the reckoning would cut. The principal's office, for once, felt like a cage. Principal Vance perched behind his polished desk, fingers laced so tightly the knuckles went white. Mrs. Harlan sat opposite, her once impeccable composure collapsing in slow motion. Blotched cheeks, trembling chin, eyes darting from door to window as if planning an escape. Across from them, Commander Yara Williams stood tall and motionless, flanked by two silent SEALs. Her uniform demanded respect. Her presence suffocated any excuse before it could be spoken. Mrs. Harlan opened the meeting with brittle aggression. "This is a misunderstanding. Nia's a troubled student. She's been caught lying before. What happened on the field? She tripped. Any bruises are from her own clumsiness." She forced a weak smile toward Mr. Vance, desperate for an ally. The principal's reply was a nervous cough. "I'm sure there's a way to resolve this quietly. No need to involve outside authorities." Yara cut him off with a look that broke no dissent. She set a thick manila folder on the desk. The flap bore an official stamp, and in crisp lettering, "United States Navy Confidential." She spoke with the cold precision of someone who'd had to deliver bad news in war zones, her words heavy enough to flatten denials before they formed. "There's no misunderstanding here. I've brought documentation of my daughter's record, her grades, her conduct, her citizenship awards, her volunteer work. Every accusation you've leveled is refuted by facts." She paused, letting the silence grow unbearable. Then she turned to Mrs. Harlan, eyes narrowing. "But I also brought another file, one that's relevant to you, Mrs. Harlan. I suggest you look closely." With hands trembling, Mrs. Harlan reached for the file but didn't open it. "I don't see what this has to do with me." Yara's gaze never left her. "Perhaps you recognize the name? Private First Class Kyle Harlan, formerly assigned to SEAL Team 6, dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank, all commendations revoked. Do you know who signed the order?" She let the question hang, then answered it herself. "I did." A shocked silence filled the office. Mr. Vance shifted uncomfortably, beads of sweat blooming on his brow. Mrs. Harlan's mouth opened and closed, words failing. The color drained from her face, leaving her almost ashen. "My son, he was set up. He never got a fair." Yara's voice was cold steel. "Your son endangered his team. He refused a direct order, abandoned his post in combat, and was caught distributing hate speech against Black and Hispanic soldiers. You want to talk about lies and shame, Mrs. Harlan? Let's start with that. Mrs. Harlan sagged in her chair, memories and humiliation crashing down like a wave. He was always a good boy. No, Yara replied, each word a verdict. He was protected by your blind pride, but I couldn't protect my unit from him. The truth cost him his career. And now, Mrs. Harlan, the truth will cost you yours. Mrs. Harlan pressed a hand to her mouth. Mr. Vance stared at the folder as if it might explode. Yara leaned forward, her tone unyielding. Let's be clear. I didn't come here seeking revenge. My history with your son has nothing to do with your conduct as a teacher. But the cruelty, the lies, and the violence I've seen in this school come from you. From your need to control, to destroy, to make others pay for your failures. She swept her gaze around the room, daring anyone to challenge her. You may fool your peers, Mrs. Harlan. You may have fooled this principal, but I won't let you destroy my daughter. I already had to remove your son to protect those under my command, and I will not hesitate to remove you for the sake of every child in this school. Mrs. Harlan shrank, eyes glistening, lower lip quivering. Her whole body seemed to collapse inward. She had spent years weaponizing Oak Creek's reputation to shield herself from consequence. That armor was gone, vaporized in seconds by the one woman she could not threaten. Yara turned to Principal Vance. I'm formally requesting that Mrs. Harlan be suspended pending a full investigation. Until then, I expect her to have no contact with students. If this school refuses, I will involve the Department of Defense and the State Attorney's Office. Mr. Vance stammered, sweat trickling down his temple. Of course, Commander, whatever you think is best. Please, let's just keep this discreet. Yara didn't smile. Nothing about this is discreet anymore. As she stood, the seals moved to block the door. Outside, the sharp click of dress shoes signaled the arrival of legal counsel and uniformed officers. Military, not local police. A tight perimeter was already forming. The school quietly but unmistakably placed on lockdown for the investigation. Mrs. Harlan sat motionless, defeated and exposed. Her power, like her pride, was in ruins. The legal lockdown swept through the school, but as doors sealed and whispers intensified, new scandals and old ghosts began to surface, threatening to shake Oak Creek to its core. The police station squatted at the edge of town like an old animal, tired, thick with the smell of sweat and cigarette smoke, its windows yellowed with the haze of decades. Marcus Vance stepped inside, his boots echoing on scuffed linoleum. Eyes narrowed as he took in the familiar tableau. The dispatcher with her lacquered nails, the calendar pinned crooked on the wall, the mug shots of black faces staring from the wanted board in disproportionate number. Behind the smudged glass of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Daniels lounged in his chair, a mountain of flesh squeezed into a tan uniform that strained at every seam. His feet were propped on the desk, next to a greasy box of donuts and a half-empty bottle of bourbon. The badge glinted on his chest, polished and meaningless. Marcus waited until Daniels finished his latest joke with the deputy, a joke punctuated by a glance at Marcus and a long, lazy laugh. Finally, Daniels gestured him in with 2 fingers, not bothering to hide his annoyance. So, Daniels drawled, not looking up from his paperwork. What brings you to my fine establishment today, Mr. Vance? Marcus drew in a breath, slow and steady. His voice was measured, polite. I'm here to file a missing persons report. My daughter, Nia Vance. She didn't come home from her school trip yesterday. I'd like to see the official record started. Daniels looked up at last, amusement flickering in his piggy eyes. Oh, that's what all this fuss is about. Son, I already got a call from the school. He rummaged in a drawer and produced a folded sheet of paper, a report already typed up, suspiciously neat. He tossed it on the desk as if it weighed nothing. Your girl got herself into trouble, that's all, he said, pulling out a handkerchief. Here, maybe you recognize this. He dangled the damp, monogrammed cloth between two fingers. Stinks of whiskey. Found it right where she went overboard. Witnesses say she was drinking. Kids these days, what can you do? Marcus didn't reach for the handkerchief. He studied Daniel's face, noting the glib satisfaction, the rehearsed sympathy. Did anyone search the water? Marcus asked quietly. Daniels barked a laugh. A few boats circled around. But it's a big ocean, son. These things happen. He leaned back, belly spilling over his belt. You know how it goes. Sometimes you just can't help who you raise. The words were a slap, but Marcus didn't let them land. He straightened, spine rigid as a flagpole. I want this investigated properly, he said, tone clipped. Daniel's smile widened, lazy and cruel. Now hold on there, boy. The word dripped with old venom. Don't come in here making demands. You got your little story, but I got paperwork from the teacher, the captain, a dozen upstanding white folks who all saw the same thing. Case closed. Don't embarrass yourself, or your daughter. Marcus's jaw worked, but he said nothing. In another world, he might have exploded, might have flipped the desk, shouted until the rafters shook, but the discipline of a lifetime on the battlefield held him tight. Daniels took a long sip of bourbon, eyes never leaving Marcus. You want to do something useful? Go home, pray, maybe talk to the pastor about forgiveness. Marcus looked down at the folded report. The official version was already in motion. A girl with a record of excellence, erased with a few lies in a stained cloth. A black father dismissed as an inconvenience. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. Instead, he clicked his heels together, raised his hand in a crisp Marine salute, a gesture Daniels barely acknowledged, more amused than threatened. Marcus turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him with a dull thud. Outside, the midday sun glared down, the air thick with heat and the scent of diesel. Marcus paused at the steps, staring up at the battered American flag flapping above the station. For a long moment he watched it twist in the wind, red, white, and blue, shadowed by grime and neglect. Under his breath, Marcus muttered, I fought for that flag. Now I have to fight against the men who hide behind it. He stood there, letting the words settle, feeling the anger coil in his gut. Not wild, not desperate, but controlled, refined. He understood now. The law in this town was just another weapon for men like Daniels, bought and paid for by the likes of Victor Caldwell. Justice was a story told by the powerful and rewritten whenever it suited them. Marcus walked to his car, the old Ford pickup as battered as his pride, and sat behind the wheel for a long minute, eyes closed, breathing deep. The war had changed. He would not win this one in courtrooms or by appealing to men like Daniels. He needed a new plan. He needed soldiers. He pulled out his battered address book and dialed the first number. Sam, it's Marcus. I need you. I need all of you. As the line clicked open and a familiar voice answered, Marcus felt the years between Vietnam and now collapse into a single, burning moment of purpose. This was no longer about survival. It was about justice by any means left to a man who had already lost everything once. The bar looked the same as it had in decades past. Dark, battered, a sanctuary for the forgotten. A haze of cigarette smoke drifted beneath flickering neon, clinging to every crack in the warped paneling. Marcus slipped inside, the door creaking behind him. The jukebox crooned a sad country song no one cared to finish. At a back table, Sam the tech carter hunched over a whiskey, his graying hair tied in a stubby ponytail, thick glasses glinting beneath the brim of a faded Marine Corps cap. Sam had been the radio wizard in the platoon, a man who could make sense of static and tap into forbidden channels halfway across the jungle. Now he tuned out the world, hunched over bar napkins scrolled with half-finished crossword puzzles and schematics no one but him understood. Big Mike Washington, broad-shouldered, barrel-chested with a scar that split his left eyebrow, slouched beside Sam, nursing a mug of beer. Mike's knuckles were as swollen as the day he left Da Nang. He still wore the same army jacket, the cuffs stained with oil and memory. Marcus sat down across from them. For a moment, none of them spoke, just the low hum of the refrigeration unit, the barkeep's muttered curses, and the old ache that never left their bones. Sam broke the silence first, peering at Marcus over the rim of his glass. "Heard you were looking for trouble, Vance. Trouble find you instead." Marcus looked at them both. "They found my family." Mike grunted. "The girl?" Marcus nodded once. The grief and rage needed no explanation. In a town like theirs, bad news traveled faster than forgiveness. Sam tapped the table. "Say it. Don't make us guess." Marcus leaned in, voice steady. "They tried to kill Nia. Covered it up. The sheriff's in their pocket. If we wait on the law, my girl's story dies in the dark." The silence that followed was different, charged, electric. Mike's jaw tightened. Sam set down his glass and pulled his cap lower as if steeling himself against old ghosts. "Same old war, huh?" Mike said. "Just change the battlefield." Sam glanced around, then nodded at Marcus. "What do you need?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Ears, muscle. You in?" Sam grinned, showing a flash of broken teeth. "You remember what we did to that radio post in Hugh?" Marcus managed a grim smile. I remember you got us out without a scratch." Mike pounded the table softly, the echo lingering. "I still got my tools in the van. Ain't pretty, but she'll get the job done." Marcus felt a weight lift. "This isn't just for Nia. It's for all of us." The pact was made with no need for oaths. Each man carried his own reasons, his own unhealed wounds. Each understood the cost of inaction. Outside, the late sun turned the parking lot gold and dirty. They climbed into Mike's battered van, an unmarked relic that still smelled of cordite and gasoline. Inside, Sam rummaged through a crate of equipment. Binoculars, an old film camera, a reel-to-reel tape recorder patched with electrical tape. "No wiretaps, nothing fancy," Sam said, adjusting his glasses. "But we'll get what we need, like the old days. Low tech, no mistakes." Their first stop was the Caldwell estate, a fortress of stone and glass perched above the bay. They parked in the shade of a stand of pines, careful to keep the van out of sight. Through binoculars, they watched the comings and goings, the cars, the gardeners, the routine. Mike kept watch, chewing a toothpick, one boot on the dash. "Rich folks never see the old men who cut their grass, do they?" Sam set up the camera, clicking the shutter every few minutes. "Nope, and they never look up either." Marcus scanned the windows, his anger sharp but focused. "We need proof. Something that ties Langford and Brody to Nia's accident. Anything. Patterns, faces, secrets." Hours passed. Shadows crept across the lawn. They rotated shifts, keeping records. Who left? Who arrived? Which lights stayed on past midnight? Late that night, Langford's car rolled up the driveway. Brody stumbled out, unsteady, head low, trailed by Langford's sharp silhouette. Their body language was tense, arguing, bickering in the shadows. Sam clicked photo after photo, catching a moment when Langford shoved Brody against the car, her mouth twisted in fury. "Something's up," Sam muttered. "He's coming apart." They watched as Brody slipped inside, leaving Langford alone on the porch, scanning the darkness as if she sensed eyes on her. Back at the van, Mike gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "Did she just—" Sam replayed the tape, then looked at Marcus. "She swapped the meds. She's killing him slowly." Marcus felt cold resolve settle over his anger. "We don't have time. If Victor dies before he signs, everything goes to Brody, and Langford gets her hands on the lot. If he lives, if we get him the truth, we have a chance." The three men sat in tense silence as the wind howled over the bluff. In the mansion above, evil worked quietly, masked by good intentions and silk scarves. Marcus watched the light in Victor's room flicker and fade. He made his decision. We save him, or we lose everything. The days after Victor's near death hung over the town like a bruise. At Coastal Bay High, nothing seemed changed on the surface. Students drifted between classes. Teachers gossiped in the lounge, and the sun slanted through dusty windows, as if nothing in the world had shifted. But for Brody Caldwell, the air itself was charged with dread. It began with small things. Monday morning, Brody opened his locker and found his left shoe soaking wet, salt water pooling on the bottom shelf, sand scattered like a taunt. The shoe was identical to the one Nia had worn on the field trip. He stared at it, knuckles whitening, pulse hammering in his throat. Someone had to be playing a trick, but who would dare? That afternoon, a folded scrap of paper dropped from his history book. He uncrumpled it with trembling hands. Just one line scrawled in shaky letters. "I know you take lithium." The note burned in his palm, a secret dragged from the bottom of the sea. At first, Brody tried to brush it off. He snapped at his friends, called them idiots for joking about ghosts, but there was an edge to his voice he couldn't hide. When he confronted the group, none would meet his eyes. Even the boldest bully, Mark, muttered, "Wasn't me, man," and drifted away. A chill grew in the spaces between them. It only got worse. On Tuesday, Brody came home to find the word murderer traced in dew across his car windshield. At night he dreamed of water, of hands slipping from rusty railings, of Nia's eyes unblinking, accusing. Everywhere he turned, Langford noticed first. She cornered him outside her classroom, her smile brittle, her eyes sharp. "You look terrible," she whispered, voice low enough for no one else to hear. Brody glared at her. "Someone's screwing with me. Locker pranks, notes, sick stuff. You know anything about it?" Langford's mouth tightened. "No, and you'd do well to keep your mouth shut. The less you say, the safer we are. Do you understand?" But Brody didn't believe her. Paranoia crept in, twisting everything. Every hallway was a threat, every whisper a warning. He grew erratic in class, snapping at teachers, pacing the halls. He started missing doses, scared the lithium was poisoned. The balance Langford had so carefully maintained began to tilt. First a tremor, then a landslide. Marcus watched it all unfold from a distance. The campaign was subtle, methodical. Sam and Mike made sure nothing could be traced. A borrowed set of keys from a friendly janitor. Careful timing to slip notes into Brody's locker, to plant the soaked shoe at just the right moment. Every detail was a reminder. The past was not buried. Someone was coming. One morning, Brody sat in the back of chemistry, knuckles white around his pencil, sweat beating at his hairline. The teacher droned on about reactions and solvents, the class half asleep. Out the window, a thick fog rolled in from the sea. Movement caught his eye. Someone in a dark hooded sweatshirt standing just beyond the fence. The figure was motionless, shrouded in gray, face hidden. Brody blinked, rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, the shape was still there. His breath caught. Nia. It had to be. She was supposed to be gone, drowned, vanished, erased. But there she stood, watching, silent as the grave. Panic boiled up, unstoppable. Brody leaped to his feet, knocking over his chair. "She's here," he shouted, wild-eyed, pointing out the window. "She's out there. She's back." The class erupted in confusion. The teacher called for order. Brody scrambled for the door, but the hooded figure melted into the mist. Langford arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. She found Brody slumped in the hallway, shaking, eyes wild. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, kneeling beside him. He glared at her, voice breaking. "You said she was dead. You said nobody would come for us, but she's here. She's coming for me." Langford forced his face toward hers, her grip bruising. "Get it together, Brody. It's just your nerves. You're not thinking straight. You need to get back on your medication. I'll take care of everything." But for the first time, Brody pulled away, suspicion glinting in his eyes. "Or maybe you're the one sending the notes. Maybe you want me to crack so you can pin it all on me. Maybe you were never on my side." Langford recoiled as if slapped, the alliance between them buckling. She rose to her feet, voice cold. "Grow up, Brody. You're making this worse for both of us." But Brody was done listening. He staggered away, eyes darting, mind unraveling, the world closing in. From the edge of the campus, Nia, hood up, face shadowed, watched as the two of them tore themselves apart. She slipped away into the fog, silent, unseen, but never powerless again. And in the growing cracks, the empire of silence began to fall. Rain hammered the windows of Coastal Bay High as the day dragged into late afternoon. The corridors emptied, leaving only the hum of custodians and the muffled clatter of keys. In her office, Miss Langford sat beneath a harsh desk lamp, shuffling stacks of lesson plans that never really needed her attention. Her posture was perfect, her lipstick unblemished, but her hands fidgeted on the mahogany. A knock. The door flew open without waiting for a response. Brody stumbled in, eyes wild, hair damp, face drawn thin with panic. He looked worse than ever, his skin almost gray, hands trembling. Langford's heart lurched, not with concern, but with calculation. She rose from her seat, closing the blinds in a single swift movement. "Brody," she hissed, "what are you doing here? You're supposed to keep a low profile." He slammed the door behind him and nearly tripped over the edge of the rug. "I can't do it anymore." His voice cracked. "Where's my medicine? You said you'd get me more. I'm losing it. I'm seeing things, hearing things. She's out there. Nia is out there. I know it." Langford pressed a manicured finger to her lips. "Keep your voice down. Do you want the whole school to hear you?" She crossed the room and gripped his arm, steering him toward her desk. "Sit. Breathe. Tell me what happened." Brody slumped into the chair, clutching his knees, rocking back and forth. "You promised. You said if I did what you wanted, I'd be safe. But I'm not. The notes, the shoe, the messages, I know you sent them. You're trying to make me crazy. You want me to take the fall, don't you?" Langford's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. If I wanted you gone, you'd already be gone. You need to calm down." Brody shot to his feet, eyes burning. "No. You used me. You told me to get rid of her. You said it was the only way. You wanted my father's money, not me." Langford's hand moved in a blur. The slap rang out sharp as a gunshot. Brody reeled, a stunned look on his face. Shut up, you idiot, Langford hissed. You killed her. You pushed her. I cleaned up your mess. Don't you dare pin this on me. If you go down, you'll drag me with you, but I'll make sure you go first. Brody staggered back, rubbing his jaw. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain battered the glass, thunder rolling above the building. Langford's chest heaved, her mask slipping further than ever before. He stared at her, tears pricking his eyes. You ruined everything. She turned her back to him, gathering herself. You did this, Brody. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. There's no more medicine. There's no more help. If you break, you're on your own. His voice broke, wounded, furious. I hope you burn. He slammed the door behind him, footsteps echoing down the hall. For a moment, Langford stood alone in the silence, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles went white. She didn't see the reel-to-reel tape recorder tucked beneath her desk, the green light flickering as the last inches of tape wound past the spindle. Out in the battered van, Sam rewound the tape with practiced fingers. Marcus and Mike leaned in, listening as the voices crackled through the static. Langford's confession, Brody's accusations, the raw, ugly truth of their alliance laid bare. The tape ground to a halt. Sam cursed under his breath. Out of tape. We missed the last bit. Marcus frowned, but hope flickered in his eyes. It's not perfect, but it's something. Enough to blow them apart. Mike tapped the plastic case. Will it hold up in court? Marcus shook his head. No judge in this county would listen, but it's enough to start a fire. We don't need a conviction yet. We just need doubt, suspicion. Enough to make Victor look twice. He turned the cassette over in his hands, watching the tape glimmer under the van's dim light. This is a spark, not the whole blaze. Mike grinned, all teeth. Then let's send it where it'll do the most damage. Outside the storm raged, but inside a different kind of reckoning was taking shape. Langford and Brody were unraveling, their secrets no longer safe. The power they had wielded in shadows now threatened to expose them under the brightest light. Marcus slid the tape into an envelope, his handwriting firm and clear. For Victor Caldwell. Urgent. He sealed it shut. Resolve hardening. The war for Nia's justice was moving into a new phase, one where truth, however incomplete, could no longer be contained. The next move belonged to the dying king. The storm reached its crescendo at midnight, rattling the windows of the Caldwell mansion until they shuddered in their frames. Rain hammered the slate roof. Lightning slashed the sky in furious bursts, and the great house seemed to shrink beneath the assault of wind and guilt. Victor Caldwell lay in his darkened bedroom, breath rasping beneath the mask, eyelids fluttering, machines beeping in uncertain rhythm, monitors flashing warnings in coded red. He could taste the end, felt it inching closer with every pulse, but his mind, battered but unbroken, lingered on unfinished business. He dreamed of ships in the channel, of the scent of brine and oil, of a time when power was something he could hold in his hand. But now that grip was loosening and he was forced to count every mistake. A soft sound stirred him. Not the nurse. Her footsteps were careful, scheduled, never this quiet. A shadow flickered in the doorway, moving like smoke. Marcus Vance entered with the silent precision of a soldier. Rainwater dripped from his jacket. His face, cast in stormlight, was carved with determination. He paused by the door, scanned the room, and then moved swiftly to Victor's side. Victor opened his eyes, startled, instinctively pressing the call button. But Marcus's hand covered his, strong yet not threatening. I'm not here to hurt you, Marcus said quietly. But you need to listen. You have one last chance to do something right. Victor stared at him, eyes narrowing. The face before him was familiar from town. Never this close. Never with so much purpose. Who let you in? No one, Marcus replied. You pay men to keep people out. You never thought anyone would come for the truth. Marcus pulled the hidden vial of real heart medication from his pocket, then compared it to the bottle by Victor's bed. You're dying faster than you need to. She's been swapping your meds. Victor went rigid. His mind, sluggish with fatigue and poison, worked furiously to connect the dots. Langford, she's killing you, Marcus said, voice clipped, just as she tried to kill my daughter. For a moment, Victor struggled to speak, but his words died in a wheeze. Marcus acted quickly, preparing a fresh injection of the real medication and slipping it into Victor's IV. He watched the monitor steady, the rhythm of Victor's heartbeat finding a steadier pace. The old man's chest rose with new air. Pain etched deeper in his features as awareness returned. Victor's eyes, sharper now, glistened with suspicion and dawning horror. Why are you helping me? Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket, rain-stained, marked in firm handwriting. For Victor Caldwell. Urgent. He placed it on the bedside table, then unspooled the old reel-to-reel tape recorder Sam had prepped. The whir of the machine filled the room as Marcus pressed play. At first there was only static, then voices, Langford's, cold and commanding, Brody's, cracked and desperate. The confession spilled through the darkness, slicing Victor open with each word. You pushed her. I cleaned up your mess. If you go down, you'll drag me with you. Victor clutched the sheet with a trembling fist as the truth played out. His son, his legacy, twisted by greed and cowardice, the woman he trusted, calculating and deadly. Every word was a blow, one he could not parry, could not buy off. The tape ground to a halt. Silence pressed between them thicker than the storm outside. Victor turned, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, tears not for himself, but for the loss that now engulfed everything he once believed he controlled. He tried to speak, voice thick with grief. Why didn't you finish it? Why not kill me after what my son did to your child? Marcus met his gaze, steady, resolute. Because my daughter is alive, and because I'm a soldier, not a murderer. I want justice for Nia, for all of us. Victor's shoulders sagged. For the first time in decades, he seemed stripped of power, of entitlement, just a father, broken, shamed, desperate for redemption. He reached out, his liver-spotted hand shaking, and gripped Marcus's wrist. Help me, Victor whispered. Help me do one last thing right. Bring me to the graduation tomorrow. I want to clean house before I go. Thunder cracked. The storm's rage only underscored the gravity of the moment. Marcus nodded. The old warrior's vow, unspoken but unbreakable. Outside the door, the mansion's secrets seemed to tremble. One final reckoning on the horizon. The judgment Victor had long postponed was no longer his to avoid. The next day would bring the reckoning not just for Brody and Langford, but for Victor himself and the legacy he left behind. The storm inside the Caldwell house was just beginning. The auditorium glowed with chandeliers and banners, every seat filled with families in their Sunday best. Graduation at Coastal Bay High was always a spectacle, names called, diplomas given, futures imagined. This year the room buzzed with something darker, a tension humming beneath the surface of every practiced smile. On stage, Miss Langford stood behind the lectern, a vision of somber elegance. Her black dress hugged her frame. A string of pearls glimmered at her throat. As the ceremony reached its height, she held up a hand for silence. We gather today not only to celebrate achievement, she began, her voice tremulous with false grief, but to mourn the loss of one of our brightest students, Nia Vance. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that anyone can rise above circumstance. She paused, letting a delicate tear trail down her cheek. Let us honor her by striving to be better, by holding compassion in our hearts, and by supporting one another through even the darkest storms. Applause followed, polite, uncertain, hollow. The students sat in rows, their faces stiff with confusion or guilt. Brody sat alone near the back, hair disheveled, his hands gripping the edge of his chair so tightly, his knuckles blanched. His eyes darted from Langford to the doors, then to the floor, where a puddle of sweat collected at his feet. Langford continued, drawing out every word with theatrical solemnity. This class has overcome so much, but it is in adversity that we reveal our true character. Nia's spirit lives on in each of us, urging us to act with integrity, and the doors at the rear of the auditorium burst open with a clap that silenced every whisper. A line of men, weathered and upright, filed into the aisle. At their head strode Marcus Vance, his blue marine dress uniform immaculate, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The medals on his chest flashed with every step, and his eyes, sharp, unyielding, swept the room like a blade. Gas rippled through the crowd as he approached, flanked by Sam and Big Mike, both in their own faded military jackets. Behind them, more veterans blocked the doors, forming a wall of silent defiance. Sheriff Daniels, stationed at the entrance with his deputies, tried to intercept, but the mass of old soldiers closed ranks around him. He blustered, "You can't. This is a private ceremony." But the veterans stared him down, unmoved, their authority older and deeper than any badge he wore. On stage, Langford's hands faltered, the microphone trembling in her grip. "Mr. Vance, this is highly inappropriate. Please." Marcus climbed the steps, the crowd parting before him as if by instinct. He stopped at center stage, the overhead lights gleaming off his medals, and turned to face the audience. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from the shadows at stage left, a wheelchair rolled forward, pushed by Sam, guided with quiet care. Victor Caldwell, gaunt and gray, sat hunched but alert, his gaze fixed on Langford with a mixture of agony and resolve. A murmur of shock swept through the auditorium, but it was nothing compared to what came next. From the wing, a slender figure stepped onto the stage, hair braided and eyes alight with determination. Nia Vance, alive, bruised, but radiant, stood in the harsh stage lights, chin lifted, gaze sweeping the crowd. There was an audible gasp, a wave of disbelief so strong it seemed to lift the whole room. For a moment, Langford could only stare, the microphone falling from her hand, the sound shrieking with feedback. Brody's scream tore through the silence. "No, no, she's supposed to be dead." He scrambled up, tripping over his own chair, trying to claw his way out of the row. On stage, Nia faced the crowd, her voice steady, clear, slicing through the shock. "I'm not dead. I survived, and I won't be silent anymore." Marcus stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, a father's strength, lending her all the courage he had carried alone. Langford, white with terror, tried to recover. "This is absurd. This is a stunt. The police—" Sheriff Daniels, still blocked by veterans, blustered from the aisle. "This is against the law. No one has the right—" Victor raised a trembling hand, voice faint but firm. "You will listen." The hush that followed was absolute. Victor looked at his son, then at Langford. Pain and shame etched deep in his lined face. "For years I allowed my money to silence people. I let my own weakness buy me comfort. But I have heard the truth about what happened to Nia, about the lies told in this room, about the poison in my own house." He nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward and set a tape recorder on the podium. Sam pressed play. Langford's voice spilled into the auditorium. Her threats, her confessions, the plan to cover up Nia's murder. Brody's voice followed, sobbing, accusatory, desperate. The room erupted in chaos. Parents shouting, teachers shaking their heads, students weeping. Daniels tried to push forward again, but the wall of veterans held. On stage, Langford's mask shattered. She lunged for Victor, her hands clawed and shaking, screaming, "You ruined everything. I did this for us." But Nia stepped between them, dropping into a defensive stance learned long ago from her father. With a swift, practiced movement, she twisted Langford's arm behind her back, forcing her to the floor. Langford screamed again, pain and humiliation drowning her rage. Nia met her eyes, voice low but unshakable. "It's over." At the edge of the stage, the state troopers moved in, sweeping past the dumbstruck local police. One officer read Langford her rights as she was pulled to her feet, tears streaking her cheeks. Another placed a gentle but firm hand on Brody's shoulder, guiding him off stage. For once, Brody did not resist. The crowd watched, silent, as the law, real law, not bought and paid for, finally did its work. Marcus joined Nia at center stage, placing a steadying hand on her back. Victor slumped in his wheelchair, weeping, not for himself, but for all the pain he had allowed. A murmur began in the crowd, soft at first, then building. Justice. Justice. As the officers escorted Langford and Brody from the auditorium, the weight of history seemed to lift just a little. The ghosts of old secrets, old power, and old hate faded beneath the raw, unyielding light of truth. Nia, tears slipping down her cheeks, looked at her father, then at the community she had just reclaimed for herself and for those who would come after. She stood tall, survivor, witness, agent of change. Behind her, the stage was littered with the detritus of a broken past, pearls, mascara, tears, shame. But before her was something new, unbroken, a path that belonged to all of them now. And as the applause began to build, a rising, rolling thunder, Nia realized that confession was not just a reckoning. It was the beginning of something neither Langford nor Brody could ever have foreseen. The state police headquarters was a fortress of glass and stone, cold even under the midday sun. In a small, windowless interview room, Evelyn Langford sat across from her court-appointed attorney, wrists cuffed, eyes rimmed with fatigue, but still burning with a flicker of defiance. Her pearl necklace and tailored dresses were gone, replaced by a shapeless gray jumpsuit. The transformation was striking. Once the queen of the classroom, now just another number in a long, locked corridor. She barely glanced up as the detectives entered, files under their arms and a tape recorder ready. A badge gleamed at the lead investigator's collar. He had no patience for small-town politics, and he wasn't there for show. "Miss Langford," he began, his tone measured. "Before we proceed, is there anything you wish to say?" Langford didn't answer. Her lawyer, a thin, anxious man, whispered for her to remain silent. The detective clicked a pen and began. "We have multiple charges already filed: attempted murder, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and fraud. But something about your history doesn't add up. The fingerprints from your booking matched a file in another state. A sealed file. Would you like to tell us about that?" Langford's jaw tightened. For a moment she seemed to weigh her options, but pride held her tongue. The detective set a stack of documents on the table and slid a photograph across the surface. A mug shot, faded at the corners, stared back. The woman in the photo had Langford's eyes, but the hair was darker, the cheekbones sharper, and the mouth set in a cruel, determined line. He waited. When Langford said nothing, he continued. You're not Evelyn Langford, born Evelyn Harris in 1946, committed to Ridgewood State Hospital in 1968 after the suspicious death of your husband, John Harris. Insurance payout never proved. You escaped from custody 2 years later and disappeared. The trail went cold until now. Her lawyer's face drained of color. Evelyn, is this true? Langford didn't blink. Her eyes remained fixed on the table, her hands twisting in the cuffs. The detective pressed on. You underwent plastic surgery, changed your name, used forged credentials to move state to state, teaching wherever you could. Everywhere you went there were rumors. Missing money, unexplained deaths, always just beyond the law's reach. You preyed on the weak, manipulated the vulnerable, all while pretending to be a champion for your students. He tapped the mugshot. This isn't about mental illness or even greed. This is about a pattern, a life dedicated to exploitation, control, and escape. You targeted Brody. Yes, but he was only your latest pawn. Langford finally spoke, her voice a whisper. He needed someone. So did I. The lawyer leaned forward. Evelyn, you must tell the truth if you want any hope. She cut him off with a bitter laugh. The truth? You think truth means anything in a world built on lies? The detective shook his head. You had a choice. You could have run again. Instead, you tried to erase a child, destroy a family, poison an entire community. Why, Evelyn? Why take it this far? For a moment, something like pain flickered in her eyes, regret, or maybe just exhaustion. Because I knew no one would believe them. Not against me? Not against what I built? The silence stretched. Her lawyer sifted through the file, hands shaking. They'll charge you in multiple states, the insurance fraud, the escape, the attempted murder. This isn't just local anymore. The detective placed the mugshot beside her present-day booking photo. The contrast was jarring. Then and now, predator in every era. He looked her in the eye. You're finished. All of it. Every name, every lie. The mask is off. Langford slumped in her chair, the fight draining from her at last. I never wanted it to end like this. People like you never do, the detective replied. Outside the room, the state's attorney and a team of investigators began assembling the case. They called other jurisdictions, compiled witness lists, reviewed financial trails, and forged credentials. For every lie Langford had told, there was a thread to unravel. Meanwhile, Brody sat alone in a separate cell, his mind fractured, his hands shaking. He stared at the blank wall, replaying the trial, the recording, the moment when all protection vanished. He was no longer the heir, the favorite, or even the monster. Just a broken boy used and discarded. Back in the interview room, the lawyer gathered his files, despair settling into his bones. Evelyn, I will do what I can, but you must cooperate. Langford stared ahead, her gaze hollow. I'm tired, she said quietly. Let them do what they want. As the officers prepared to lead her away, the detective left one last document on the table. Her mugshot, her real name, the record of what she'd done. Langford looked down at it, the lines of her life suddenly finally clear. In that moment, she seemed smaller than ever. Just another criminal exposed, her beauty and wit no longer weapons. Take her away, the detective ordered. The door closed with a heavy finality. Across town, news spread fast. The town buzzed with rumor and awe. No one could believe the truth. The infamous Miss Langford, a fraud, a murderer, a ghost in plain sight. But in every story, whispered in kitchens, on sidewalks, at school and church, one fact was inescapable. The real abnormality, the true sickness, had never been Brody. He was a casualty, a tool. The real monster was the one who hid in plain sight, wearing a teacher's smile. As the state police prepared their case, and as the media caught scent of the scandal, the old order of Coastal Bay was forever changed. And as Langford's old mug shot stared from the case file, one chapter ended. A new kind of justice ready to begin. The wind along the coast had changed. Where once it had brought the stinging taste of salt and old secrets, now it carried something lighter. A promise that the pain of the past could finally become part of the soil, not the air. 1 year after the reckoning at Coastal Bay High, the shoreline looked the same. Waves rolling, gulls wheeling overhead, the battered skeleton of the old pier reaching out into the green-gray water. But for Nia Vance, everything had changed. She stood with her father on the rocks where not so long ago she had clawed her way from the surf. Bloodied, but alive. She looked at the sea and felt no fear. Only freedom. The past year had moved with the weight of a tide. News of the trial had spread far beyond their small Florida town. Headlines screamed of betrayal, greed, and a conspiracy that had stained not only a school, but the entire community. Yet beneath the sensation, real change was taking root. Langford's trial had been swift and merciless. The evidence, her confession, the forgeries, the old mug shot, painted a portrait so chilling that the courtroom sat silent even when she tried to charm, to plead, to blame. She was sentenced to life without parole. Her true name restored on the docket, and her crimes read out in full. Her eyes, once so calculating, were blank as she was led away. Word drifted years later. She died alone in prison, unvisited, buried without ceremony. Her final punishment was not the cell but the silence. For Brody Caldwell, the reckoning had been more complicated. At first, rage and fear consumed him as he entered the state youth facility, stripped of every privilege, every expectation. But the system there was not like Langford's world of masks and manipulation. Brody was forced to confront himself, his sickness, his cowardice, and his complicity. Therapy was long and punishing. The boy who had once barked orders and spat hate spent nights sleepless, haunted by what he'd done and failed to do. In time, Brody found humility, learning to fix engines and clean floors, to live without the weight of family name. When he was released, he disappeared into another county, working quietly at an auto shop, making a modest life out of sweat and honest labor. Every Christmas, a letter arrived for Nia. Awkward, handwritten, confessional. Each note apologized for a year he could never return. Nia answered only once, a simple line. Forgiveness is for my heart, not your comfort. Yet the letters kept coming year after year, long after the world had forgotten. Victor Caldwell, freed from both Langford's poison and his own illusions, lived just long enough to see the fruits of change. He donated nearly all his wealth to the new foundation, renamed the Nia Vance Fund, which awarded full scholarships to deserving students of all backgrounds, built a new library, and funded counseling and anti-bullying initiatives throughout the district. His final days were quiet, marked by letters of apology and moments of humility that had eluded him for decades. And Nia, for a time she kept her story close, wary of the curiosity and pity that threatened to drown her all over again. But the world would not let her remain a symbol or a victim. The scholarship let her travel, let her see America in all its wounded beauty, Boston's campuses, the Great Lakes, the heartland. She never forgot the lessons her father taught: strength, truth, and the courage to reach for hope. The old wounds faded, replaced by new challenges, new triumphs. Nia graduated with honors, joined the Navy, and built a life that was more than anyone, least of all those who had tried to erase her, could have imagined. Decades passed. The town had changed. The old high school was gone, replaced by a gleaming new campus, its walls covered in murals painted by students from every background. The banners in the gym celebrated names that would once have been erased. And on a golden spring morning, the community gathered to dedicate the new Coastal Bay Library, built with the last of Victor's money, named for a woman who had refused to drown. Nia Robinson stood backstage, her uniform crisp, rows of ribbons bright on her chest. She was 68 now, silver streaking her braids, her bearing still as steady as the day she stood up to Langford on that stage. Her father was gone, but she carried him with her in every word, every step. She stepped up to the podium, applause rolling through the crowd. Faces looked up at her, black, white, brown, every shade of a new America. Nia cleared her throat, her voice strong but edged with memory. 51 years ago, I stood in a room not unlike this one. I was the only black girl in my graduating class. I was alone, or so I thought. I faced hatred not just in words, but in the actions of people who believed they could take everything from me. My voice, my hope, even my life. They failed. Not because I was exceptional, but because I refused to believe the lies that said I was less. Because people found the courage to stand beside me even when it was dangerous. Because justice, though slow, is possible when we demand it, when we build it with our own hands. The crowd sat rapt, the silence full of awe and gratitude. I have learned over all these years that evil doesn't vanish. It changes its shape. Once it tried to throw me into the sea. Now it hides behind screens, behind policies, behind silence. Today's enemies use different weapons, anonymous messages, quiet exclusions, cold bureaucracy. But the harm is just as real. Never believe the world is finished with injustice. It never is. But neither is it finished with courage. She paused, letting her words sink in. Her gaze swept the room, catching the eyes of the students who would carry this fight forward. When I was a girl, they tried to erase me. When I was a woman, I refused to be silent. Today I ask you, do not be the ones who stay quiet. Silence is the ally of cruelty. Speak, stand, make them see you, hear you, reckon with you. The future is not written in stone. It is written by the brave. Applause thundered, rising in waves. Some in the crowd wept. Others simply smiled, hands clasped over their hearts. As the ceremony ended, Nia lingered at the edge of the water, just as she had as a girl. The sea before her was not the same. No longer a threat, but a living memory, carrying the voices of the lost and the hope of those yet to come. She breathed deeply, tasted salt on the wind, and knew she was free. And the story, unfinished, belonged to all of them now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive and then speak. Nia's journey reminds us that injustice isn't a relic of the past. It evolves, finding new disguises in every generation. Yet so does courage. We witnessed a young black woman, once cast aside, rise not just for herself, but for everyone who ever felt unseen, unheard, or unwelcome. Through the darkness of betrayal and violence, Nia, Marcus, and their unlikely allies showed us the transformative power of truth, forgiveness, and hope. This story is not just about the evils people commit, but about the ordinary and extraordinary strength it takes to stand up, break the silence, and build something better. It's about how communities can heal, and how the future is shaped by those willing to act, even when the world urges them to be quiet. So let me ask you, when have you found the strength to speak up, even when it was hard, or wished someone had done it for you? Share your story below. Your voice could be the light someone else needs. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories and unforgettable characters. Your support helps us bring more voices to light. Together, let's keep building a world where no one has to stand alone.